Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. So, today we're going once more to Peter Asher and his memories of the Beatles and the music in general from his book, The Beatles from A to Z. Peter Asher decided to do his book of Beatle memories and other music from the alphabet. So, that was an interesting idea, and this way is providing memories and stories, and it moves quickly, and it's been an interesting read so far. It's been great to learn about the Beatles through his eyes and remembrances, so let's get right to it and find out even more. We're starting with If I Fell in Love with You. There were a lot of groups that loved the Everly Brothers and their duets, Peter and Gordon, Chad and Jeremy, Simon and Garfunkel, and the Beatles too. And the Beatles, John and Paul, made a great duo. Peter said that they sang a lot of the Everly style thirds, close harmony singing, and they did it well. He thought that they were the best duos in the history of rock and roll, as well as being a part of the best band in the history of rock and roll. I want to tell you, this song was written by George Harrison, and it comes from the album Revolver. George at this time was trying to figure out how many songs he could have on an album. Peter thought that George was thrilled to have Paul's piano part in the song. If I Needed Someone. This is another George Harrison song, and George acknowledged Roger McGuinn for the feel of the song because he was the lead guitarist for the Byrds and he played the 12-string guitar, and George had borrowed the sound for his song. And I Need You, another George Harrison song. George thought that this was a terrific song, and it was one of his favorites. Peter brings up the sound of the wah wah effect, and George played the part while Paul turned the volume knob up and down at the same time to create the perfect crescendo and decrescendo for each two-note phrase. Now we're to John, I'm So Tired. This song came from the White Album. It was written late at night when John couldn't sleep, and he was in India and didn't have alcohol or drugs to help him out while he was there. I'm Only Sleeping. Peter said that George Harrison did some great work with the backward guitar, and it was rough in those days to do a backward sound. You had to figure out which phrase you wanted and then have it reversed. The notes have to be played precisely then and it's placed in the machines backwards. So George did it right. In My Life, John Lennon's song, and he thought it was John Lennon's masterpiece. Paul told Peter that he came up with the guitar and bass intro, and Paul said he was inspired by The Tracks of My Tears by Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. Jet. This is from Paul McCartney and Wings' Band on the Run album. This song was created in Abbey Road Studio in London. Paul told Peter the song was inspired by his black Labrador puppy. He said she was the run of the litter, and they had bought her in a little pet shop near the roadside. She was wild and didn't want to stay in the fenced-in yard, and she would go out every evening, and one night she came back pregnant. She walked into the garage and had 7 little black puppies, and Jet was one of them. Jealous Guy. John wrote an honest song. He began to write it in India. He would keep changing the lyrics and reworking the melody, and he eventually put it on the Imagine album. Peter said the lyrics were inspired by a lecture given by the Maharishi. Peter thought it was about jealousy in a material way, as well as John and Paul's jealousy at being 2 brilliant songwriters. And maybe the songwriting jealousy began, and then it later turned into a Yoko-related way. So Peter was just trying to figure out what John was jealous of, and those sound like good thoughts to me. Just for today. George Harrison wrote this song on his Cloud 9 album. Peter felt it was a sad and mournful song. To Peter, the song reminded him of Imagine by John. John's song was more universal, and George's song more personal. Now we have Julia, and this song was written by John Lennon about his mother, and the most gorgeous and moving intense songs ever written by anybody, according to Peter. The lyrics came from his reading and curiosity. In the 1960s, there was a resurgence of interest in a Lebanese American poet named Khalil Gibran. In the mid-60s, his book The Prophet was quoted at weddings and other events, and there was a line John wrote that said, "Half of what I say is meaningless, but I say it just to reach you." In the poem Sand and Foam, the verse reads, "Half of what I say is meaningless, but I say it so that the other half may reach you." Asher sees this as borrowing because it's done all the time in the arts, and it's a compliment and a joy. Asher felt that no one could sing a song of love or write one more touchingly than, or be as acerbic and even angry as John Lennon. Deep Undercover. This song comes from Paul McCartney's album Pipes of Peace. Paul talks about the joy of staying in bed and other things, and it's a bit like John's song, I'm Only Sleeping. George Martin did the string arrangement for the song. Love Me Do. This was the Beatles' first single. Paul started to write the song as a teenager, and he finished most of it before he and John started to write together. John and Paul did great harmony, and Paul sang the melody in the high part, and John, he was singing underneath that. The Long and Winding Road. Peter Asher said that originally Paul McCartney had wanted Tom Jones to record the song, and the Beatles were going to do the song anyway, and then Paul wanted Tom to do a version of it too. But it never happened because Tom's record company had a single lined up for him already. Little Child. The Beatles didn't really care for this song that Paul and John wrote. They didn't think it was very creative. It was written for Ringo, but Paul and John ended up doing the recording. John played the harmonica, and Peter thought that Ringo would have sung it very well. It was his kind of song. Lady Madonna. Peter said that Paul could pick up any instrument and figure out how to play it in a short amount of time. He said he plays the piano well, and he grew up listening to jazz music because his father played piano and he had played in a jazz-like band. Peter felt that Paul got the boogie-woogie sound on the piano from the song Bad Penny Blues, and another person who influenced Paul was Fats Domino, and you can hear Fats in this song. And Peter said it was a huge hit. Michel. Paul has said that they would go to parties and he would pretend to speak French. Paul said that everyone wanted to be Sacha Distel, not because he was a cool and handsome, a fine guitarist and singer, but because he was a live-in boyfriend of Brigitte Bardot. He needed help with the French lyrics, and he first went to Jan Vaughan, the wife of a friend who spoke fluent French. She made suggestions and translated some phrases for him. Then Paul spoke to Peter's mother, who spoke French as well. She told Peter that Paul had consulted her on some French he was using in the song, and she helped him with the correct French grammar and pronunciation. The bridge of the song was John's idea, and he got it from Nina Simone's song, I Put a Spell on You. He used the words, I love you, I love you, I love you. Peter liked Paul's finger picking on the guitar, which was unusual for the Beatles when they play rhythmic guitar. Now we have Your Mother Should Know. This song was on the Magical Mystery Tour. Paul wrote the song on a harmonium that Peter Asher had in their house on Cavendish Avenue. Peter said that he and Peter were both in love with this instrument. It was a small organ with a regular keyboard and a free reed for every note, and it was activated by foot pedals that operated on bellows. Peter said that made the song sound jolly and reassuring. Nowhere Man. John wrote this song at his home in Weybridge. He was feeling depressed and out of sorts, and he was trying to think of a song, and when he thought of himself sitting there doing nothing and going nowhere, the song came to him, and it was as easy as that. And Peter said that Nowhere Man had a brilliant arrangement and production. John played the rhythm acoustic guitar, Ringo did a straightforward drum part, and Paul, according to Peter, did a double-time walking bass part. And George played a rippling super high-end guitar solo. The night before, Peter said Paul wrote this song at his family home, and Peter said he wasn't around when he wrote it because Peter himself was on the road at that time. The song ended up on Help, and they recorded the song in 2 takes. Peter thought it was amazing because the arrangement was very tight and accurate. A neat thing he said was that the guitar solo was done in octaves, played by George and Paul. Playing it in octaves, it was like playing a 12-string guitar, and they were playing it in perfect sync. And John played the Hofner piano electric, and these pianos had a great sound, and he said that they were more percussive than a Fender Rhodes or Wurlitzer electric piano, and it could cut through an electric guitar. Norwegian Wood. The Beatles song was written by John Lennon. Peter said it had mysterious lyrics, and it was one of the first use of a sitar by George Harrison on a record. Peter said he read the book about Paul McCartney by Barry Miles, and Paul had a recollection about the song. Paul said that John had the first stanza, I once had a girl, or should I say, she once had me, but nothing else. Paul said it was about an affair, and John said he didn't have the faintest idea of where the title came from. But Paul remembered Peter Asher doing his room out of wood. He said it was some really cheap pine, but it didn't make a good title. Peter said he didn't really remember his room being done in wood, and he was thinking Paul might have been thinking of a different room in the Asher house. He remembered there was some pine paneling downstairs in the room where there were parties at times. Peter said his own room had weird geometrical 50s wallpaper and no wood in it at all as he could recall. And the song ends with a case of arson. The character in the song gets revenge for having to sleep in the bath. And Peter thought that was a little bit too much. Oh, Brown Shoe. This was a George Harrison song, and he played the piano, which was rare for him, and he overdubbed a guitar solo and erased John's rhythmic guitar to have a Hammond organ part. Old Brown Shoe was a single that ended up on the B-side of the Ballad of John and Yoko. George didn't play on that song, so it was only fair that Peter thought that George got to play multiple instruments on Old Brown Shoe. So I'll end the video here, and it's been interesting to go through Peter Asher's book, The Beatles from A through Z. I like his idea to do memories from the alphabet and apply it to the Beatles and to the music memories in general. It's a good way to capture a memory. The memories brought up in this video were some that I hadn't heard about before, like the song Your Mother Should Know played on the harmonium at Peter's house. Peter said he liked the sound of the harmonium and how it made the song sound jolly and reassuring. And then another part I liked was Peter questioning Paul's memory on the pine wood in his room and on the song The Night Before, where George and Paul do their guitar parts in sync as a guitar duo. And the song only needed 2 takes, which Peter thought was amazing because how tight the arrangement was and how accurate. The little nuggets he gives for these songs are really neat to hear about. In the next video, I'll continue to find songs with Peter's special memories, and we will see the world of the Beatles through his memories. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would be greatly appreciated. I wish everyone a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of the Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.